Hello, my name's Jackie and I'm going to tell you a story. But before I tell you the story, I want to ask you a question. When you bite into a pear and the juice dribbles down your chin, or when you spread a picnic rug under a shady elm, or smell a rose, do you ever ask yourself the question, how did these plants come to be in Australia? Well, it's quite likely that the answer lies in the story of the amazing case of Dr. Ward. Nathaniel Bagshaw Ward was born in London in 1791. He was a quiet boy who loved reading, and his favourite subject was plants. Well, it is the golden age of botany, and plant collecting is all the rage. I especially like reading about the adventures of the plant hunters. The plant hunters? Oh, these were botanical buccaneers, fearless men and women who travelled the world risking life and limb in search of exotic specimens. Nathaniel read how they hunted for plants because they were, well, prized by doctors, good for building things, delicious, or their perfume divine. Then he read about how they carried these precious plants across continents and loaded them aboard ships bound for England. Oh, and then he read about how once on board, these precious plants were overwatered, underwatered, doused in salt spray, trampled by sailors, eaten by goats. Well, Nathaniel, he fancied himself as a plant hunter, but he preferred to have his adventures closer to home in the nearby woods. And when I go hunting, I always take my insect net, check, my flower press, check, and my vasculum, check. That's for keeping specimens fresh. And I believe it's most important to call plants by their proper scientific names. Over there, that's Almus glabra. That one, that's Fraxinus excelsior. This one is Quercus roba. One day, young Nathaniel was surveying his bare backyard in London. I wonder, is it possible to grow a ferny glade in a backyard in London? This calls for an experiment. He carefully prepared the ground and then headed off into the woods to hunt some ferns. Hours later, he returned with his arms full. Oh, butter me on both sides! How splendid! But then the plants shriveled up and died. The problem was that the air in London at this time was full of dark, thick, acrid coal smoke. And when this mixed with the fog that rose from the River Thames, it formed a smog. And Nathaniel's plants did not like smog. The boy came to his conclusion. It's easier to grow fur on a sandwich than a single plant in this pea soup. Well, time passed. Nathaniel grew into a fine young man, followed in his father's footsteps, studied medicine, became a doctor, moved into a house in well-closed square, and began to see his patients. But still, he dreamed of growing exotic plants. Oh, imagine being able to grow a stately palm from the Canary Islands, or a weeping cherry from Japan, or a delicate fern from far away Australia. Oh, Glycinia microphylla. Well, one day, Dr. Ward was scratching around in that bare backyard in London when he unearthed a chrysalis. Well, I'd bet a penny this will hatch into some kind of a sphinx moth. He popped it into a jar with some soil, put the lid on and checked on it daily. Well, you can imagine his surprise when one morning, but anatomy on both sides. Why, there is a fern uncurling from the soil. Well, he lost interest in the chrysalis and began to study the fern. I wonder, how long can a fern grow inside a sealed glass jar without adding any extra water? This calls for an experiment. He placed the jar on the sheltered side of the house and kept an eye on it. And after 3.5 years, the fern was still growing. Dr. Ward came to the conclusion it is possible to grow a plant inside a sealed glass jar without adding any extra water for months, if not years. Well, it wasn't long after that. He opened the newspaper to read one morning, "Precious plants perish at sea again. Head gardener at Keogh Gardens tears up wig." And way over in Australia, the botanists were beside themselves. Nearly all the specimens we send back to England die. And the farmers were complaining, "Oh, hello, we're trying to grow fruit trees and vineyards down here." And the settlers were moaning, "We're homesick for the plants of England. We want to grow bluebells, oak trees, primroses." The problem was Australia was across 2 oceans. Now that's one of the longest sea voyages in the world. Dr. Ward scratched his head in thought. I wonder if a plant can survive inside a sealed glass jar for 3.5 years without adding any extra water. Well, then surely it could survive a long sea voyage in a glass case. This calls for an experiment. Dr. Ward arranged to have some cases made. They must be very sturdy. Yes. Clumsy sailors. Yes. And goats. Goats? Yes, I know. Mr. Banks wrote extensively on the subject of goats and botanical specimens on board ships. But does anybody listen? No. He then filled the cases with some soil and planted some grapevine cuttings and grasses, then handed them into the care of his good friend, Captain Mallard, who was about to set sail for New South Wales on the Persian. "I shall place them high on the poop deck, away from the feet of omnivorous quadrupeds and clumsy sailors. And I can assure you the cases will not be opened until we arrive at our destination in the Antipodes." June 1833. Captain Mallard steered the Persian out of the Thames. South across the Atlantic, around the tip of Africa, then east across the Indian Ocean. And after many months at sea, finally arrived in Sydney. On arrival, the cases were handed to the head gardener at the Sydney Botanic Gardens. "Oh, my Jiminy! Well, look at these! These plants are alive!" So far, Dr. Ward's experiment had been a success. But could the cases keep plants alive on the longer, definitely more perilous journey from Australia back to England? The head gardener followed Dr. Ward's instructions. He cleaned out the cases, he filled them with fresh soil, and then he planted some beautiful Australian plants. And Dr. Ward had made one special request. "Please do include the delicate fern Glycinia microphylla. Why, if this little one can survive the journey, then I will know that any plant can survive. May 1834. Captain Mallard steered the Persian out into the Pacific. They rounded the Horn. They sailed north across the Atlantic. Across the equator. And finally, they sailed up the Thames to London, where Dr. Ward was waiting. Oh, butter me on both sides. Why, it's Glycinia microphylla. This is the first time this delicate beauty has been seen alive in England. Oh, I declare my cases a success. And they were a success. Soon they were being built in all shapes and sizes, and they were called Wardian Cases after the good doctor. Filled with plants, they travelled the globe from India, China, Japan, New Zealand, Turkey, Australia, and back again. Oh, and in Australia, the newspapers announced, "The Wardian Cases have arrived! Come and get your lemon, lime, orange, peach, pear, plum trees!" And we have primroses. While Dr. Ward was thrilled that his cases were travelling the world, he still preferred to have his adventures closer to home. And he continued with his experiments of growing plants under glass. To the north side of his house, he grew elegant ferns. To the south side, spring flowers and fairy roses. And on the roof, he grew tiny alpine plants. In the foul, thick smog of London, there was a place where flowers bloomed, ferns uncurled their fronds, and stately palms thrived. So, the next time you bite into a pear and the juice dribbles down your chin, or you spread a picnic rug under the shady elm, or smell a rose, just think the ancestors to these plants might have come to Australia in one of Dr. Ward's amazing cases.